Halfway through our apartment tour, my fiancée whispered that she could picture herself living there, just not with me. I finished the appointment anyway. Someone else eventually received the keys she thought would always be hers. The keys to the apartment were still warm from the lockbox when Paige said it. I can actually see myself here. She was standing in the middle of the empty living room, morning light coming through the tall windows off South Boulevard, and she said it like she was talking to the room, not to me. Like, really see it. My stuff in that corner. Plants by the window. Yeah, I said. It's a good layout. Just not with you. She said it so quietly that for a second I thought I'd misheard her over the leasing agent's phone buzzing in the hallway. I turned around and she was still looking at the window, not at me, like she'd said something about paint colors. What? Nothing. Forget it. She smiled the way she smiled at waiters when they got her order wrong, and she didn't want to make it a thing. It's nice. Let's finish the tour. I finished the tour. I don't know why. I've thought about that decision more than almost any other decision in my life, and I still don't have a clean answer. Part of me thinks I finished it because stopping would have meant admitting I'd heard her right. Part of me thinks I was just built that way. You show up to the meeting, you close out the appointment, you don't leave things half-finished. Even when the thing you're finishing is the last 20 minutes of an 8-year relationship neither of us had said out loud was ending yet. The leasing agent, a woman named Denise with a lanyard and a tablet, walked us through the second bedroom, the in-unit laundry, the little balcony that looked out over the rail trail. Paige asked good questions. Storage space, HOA fees, whether the building allowed dogs, even though we didn't have one. I answered when Denise looked at me, nodded when I was supposed to nod, and the entire time I was replaying 6 words in my head like a song stuck on the wrong verse. We didn't sign anything that day. Denise gave us a folder with the floor plan and told us applications usually moved fast in that building, sometimes within the week. I remember holding that folder in the parking garage like it weighed something. Paige didn't bring it up again until we were almost home. I'm not going to pretend I didn't say that, she said, eyes on the road. Hands at 10 and 2 like she'd learned in a driver's ed class 15 years ago and never unlearn it. You heard me. Yeah. I don't know what I meant by it. I don't want you to think I've been planning some, I don't know. Exit. Okay. That's not what this is. I didn't ask her what it was. I've wondered since if that was the actual mistake. Not finishing the tour, but not asking the question right there in the car, at the red light on South Tryon. Windows fogging slightly from the AC, fighting July heat. I just watched the light change and said, we don't have to figure it out today. She reached over and put her hand on my knee, which felt like something she did because it was expected, not because she meant it. Okay, she said. Not today. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. Her name was Paige Donnelly. We'd met at a mutual friend's engagement party almost 8 years earlier, back when I was 26, and working my second year as a freight broker for a mid-sized logistics outfit off Interstate 77, the kind of job where you learn to talk fast on the phone and live by the truck count on your board. She was in event coordination then, doing corporate conferences downtown, sharp in a way that made most rooms feel a little too small for her. We got engaged the November before the apartment tour, at a lake house up near Lake Norman that her family rented every year. I'd practiced what I was going to say in the bathroom mirror 3 separate times that weekend, and still forgot half of it. For most of those 8 years, I thought we were good. Not perfect. Nobody's perfect. But good in the way that matters. The way where you don't examine it too hard because examining it feels like tempting something. Looking back at it now, though, and I try not to use that phrase too often, because my buddy Marcus used to tease me for narrating my own life like a documentary, there'd been signs for at least a year. Not big ones. Small ones. She'd started taking calls in the bedroom with the door shut. Calls she said were about a promotion she was chasing at the marketing firm she'd moved to. She'd stopped asking me to come to her work things. I told myself that was normal, that people just get busier, that 8 years and you don't need to explain every closed door. We didn't talk about the apartment for 3 days after the tour. We went to dinner Thursday night at a place in Noda, split a bottle of wine, talked about her sister's baby shower like everything was fine, because that's what you do when you're scared to ask the question that might end something. Friday, I picked up her dry cleaning on the way home because I always did, and when I hung it in the closet, I noticed a leather duffel bag on the top shelf that I didn't recognize. Not hidden. Just there, next to the winter coats, like it had been there a while, and I'd never looked up. I didn't say anything about the bag either. Saturday morning, she made coffee and sat across from me at the kitchen island and said, I think we need to actually talk. Like really talk. I already knew. I think I'd known since the apartment. But knowing something and hearing it said out loud in your own kitchen, with the dishwasher running in the background and a mug in your hands that says world's okayest broker because it was a joke gift from Marcus 2 Christmases ago, that's a different kind of knowing. I don't think I want the apartment, she said. Not because of the apartment. Because of what it means. Moving in together again. Resetting the lease. All of it. I don't think I want to keep doing that if I'm not sure. Sure about what? About us. The coffee maker beeped. Neither of us moved to get it. How long have you not been sure? I asked. She looked down at her hands. I don't know exactly. A while. A while like months. I don't know, Nate. I'm not trying to hurt you by not having a clean timeline for this. I want to say I handled that moment with some kind of grace, said something wise, asked the right follow-up question. I didn't. I sat there and turned the mug in a slow circle on the granite and said, okay, because it was the only word that would come out without cracking. We didn't break up that morning. That's the thing nobody tells you about endings. They're rarely a single conversation. They're a long series of smaller conversations that all point the same direction, each one a little more honest than the last, until one day you're just done, and neither of you can point to the exact sentence that did it. Over the next 6 weeks, we had 4 more of those conversations. One in the car. One at 2 in the morning after she came home from her sister's, when I asked if there was someone else, and she said no with enough hesitation that I almost didn't believe her. And looking back, I don't think there was. Not yet. Not really. But I think she'd started imagining a version of her life that didn't include a man who talked about lane rates and carrier vetting at dinner parties. And once you start imagining that, it's hard to stop. The 4th conversation was the one where she moved her mother's old armchair out of the living room and into her car, and I understood without either of us saying it that we were doing this in stages because neither of us wanted to be the one who said the actual word. I said it first, in the end. Late September, a Tuesday, both of us standing in the kitchen with the lease renewal paperwork from our actual apartment sitting and signed on the counter for 3 weeks. I don't think we should renew, I said. She didn't argue. She just nodded, slow, and said, yeah, okay. She cried a little. I didn't, not then. I've never been someone who cries on cue, even when the moment calls for it. I've always needed a few days of distance before anything catches up with me, and this was no different. I helped her carry boxes to her car 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning in October, and I remember standing in the doorway of an apartment that suddenly felt too big, holding a coffee mug she'd left behind on purpose or by accident. I never found out which, and thinking that I had absolutely no idea what I was supposed to do with the rest of that day. I want to be honest about the year that came after, because it wasn't dramatic. Nobody threw a phone across a room. I didn't drink myself into anything. I went to work. I closed loads. I answered calls from carriers who wanted 3 cents more per mile than the lane could support, and I said no, the way I'd said no 1,000 times before, and it felt strange that the job could go on exactly the same when nothing else did. My friend Marcus Boyd, who I'd known since college and who worked in commercial real estate downtown, started calling me most Sundays, not because either of us said we needed to talk, but because he'd show up with 2 coffees and sit on my new, smaller apartment's one good chair and just be there while I did nothing in particular. You look like hell, he told me one Sunday in November. Thanks. You gonna do something about it? Or just keep looking like hell? I didn't have an answer that day. I think that's honestly where the story could have stopped. A guy in his early 30s, freshly single, mediocre at cooking for one, mildly resentful of every couple he saw at Trader Joe's on a Saturday. A lot of guys stay there. I almost did. What changed it, if I'm being accurate instead of dramatic, was small. It was a Monday morning in December, and I was 2 coffees in, sitting at my desk staring at a load board that hadn't moved in an hour, and my manager, a woman named Renata Voss, who'd been doing this longer than I'd been alive, who ran the Charlotte office like she'd built it with her own hands, which she basically had, stopped at my desk and said, "You've missed your numbers 3 weeks running. That's not like you. I know. I'm not asking you to explain yourself. I'm telling you I noticed." She tapped the edge of my monitor once, like punctuation. "Get it together, Nate. Not for me. For you. Whatever happened, it doesn't get to also take your job." Nobody had said anything to me that directly in months. Everyone else had been careful, gentle, tiptoeing around the breakup like it was something contagious. Renata didn't tiptoe, and for whatever reason, that was the thing that actually landed. I didn't transform overnight. That's not how any of this works, no matter what people want to believe. But I started showing up 15 minutes earlier. I started actually eating lunch instead of scrolling through old photos on my phone at my desk. I picked up a CTB certification course that Renata had been telling me for 2 years I should get around to, figuring it would look good for the account manager role that was opening up in the spring, and also because it gave my evenings something to do besides notice how quiet the apartment was. The account manager role opened in March. I got it in April, over 2 other brokers who'd been there longer than me, mostly because Renata told upper management I'd earned it, and because the numbers backed her up. I'd rebuilt 3 carrier relationships that had gone cold the year before, brought in a produce account out of the Charlotte terminal that nobody else had wanted to chase because it meant dealing with reefer units and temperature claims, which is its own special kind of headache. It wasn't a life-changing promotion. It came with a modest raise and a slightly better parking spot. But it was mine, and I hadn't gotten it by being someone's fiancé or someone's rebound story. I'd gotten it by doing the job. Marcus took me out to celebrate at a bar in South End, not far, actually, from the building we'd toured that day in July, though neither of us mentioned that. "You seem different," he said, halfway through his second beer. "Different how?" "I don't know. Steadier. You used to talk like you were waiting for something to go wrong. Now you talk like you're just doing your thing." I turned my glass a quarter turn on the bar top, an old habit I still hadn't shaken. "I think I finally stopped waiting for her to come back." "You still think about her?" "Sometimes. Not the way I used to." That was true. For the first few months, I'd thought about Paige constantly, replaying the apartment tour, replaying the kitchen conversation, wondering what I could have said differently at the red light on South Tryon. By the spring, the thinking had changed shape. It wasn't longing anymore. It was more like checking a scar to see if it still hurt, and being a little surprised, some days, that it didn't. I heard through mutual friends, secondhand and imperfect the way that information always is, that she'd moved to a smaller place near Plaza Midwood that fall, that she'd gotten the promotion she'd been chasing, that she seemed happy. I didn't reach out. She didn't either. There wasn't anger behind it, not by then. Just distance, the kind that grows naturally once 2 people stop being each other's daily habit. The next 18 months moved the way most real life moves, which is to say mostly without incident, punctuated by a handful of moments that mattered. I made senior account manager the following winter. I started running 3 mornings a week because Renata told me once, half joking, that brokers who exercised closed more loads, and even though I doubted the science, I liked how it made the mornings feel less empty. I dated a little, nothing serious, a few dinners with women I met through friends, or, once, memorably badly, through a dating app that Marcus talked me into downloading. None of it turned into anything, and for a long time I assumed that was because some part of me was still tangled up in what had happened with Paige. Eventually, I came to think it was simpler than that. I just hadn't met anyone yet who made the effort feel worth it. I picked up a coworker along the way, a broker named Trent Ashford who'd transferred in from the Nashville office, competitive in the kind of way that made the whole floor a little more tense, always angling for the biggest accounts, always making sure Renata saw his numbers before she saw anyone else's. We were never friends, exactly, but watching him operate, watching someone chase the win instead of the work, clarified something for me about the kind of broker, and honestly the kind of person, I wanted to be instead. I thought about Paige less and less. Not never. There were specific things that still snagged. The sound of a lockbox clicking open, oddly, or the smell of a particular coffee blend she used to buy from Trader Joe's. But the ache had gone from something sharp to something more like weather. It passed through. It didn't stay. I saw her again almost 2 years after the apartment tour, at a wedding neither of us had any reason to expect the other one at. A mutual friend from the old engagement party circle, getting married at a venue out past Valentine. I'd RSVP'd months earlier without checking the guest list closely. I don't think she had either. I saw her before she saw me, across the cocktail hour, in a green dress I didn't recognize, laughing at something a man beside her had said. He had his hand resting lightly at the small of her back, not gripping, just present, the way you touch someone you've stopped needing to prove anything to. She saw me a second later. Something crossed her face. Not panic, not the old guilt I half expected. Something calmer. She said something to the man beside her and walked over. "Hi," she said. "Hey. You look good, Nate." "You too." There was a pause that could have gone either way, awkward or easy, and it landed on easy, mostly because neither of us tried to force it into being more than it was. "This is Julian," she said, gesturing back toward the man, who lifted a hand in a small wave from a polite distance, giving us room. "We've been together about a year. Good to meet him." Or, from here, anyway. She almost laughed. He's not much for big introductions at weddings. Neither am I, honestly. We talked for a few minutes. Nothing heavy. She asked about work, and I told her about the promotion, and she said that was great, and meant it, I could tell. I asked about hers, and she told me she'd made director at the firm that spring. We didn't talk about the apartment. We didn't talk about the kitchen conversation, or the coffee mug, or any of it. There didn't seem to be a version of that conversation that either of us needed anymore. For what it's worth, she said, right before the wedding party started calling people to their tables. I think I said that thing in the apartment because some part of me already knew, and I didn't know how to say it any other way. I'm sorry it came out like that. You didn't deserve to find out that way. I finished the tour, I said. I think that was me not wanting to know it either. She nodded slowly. We were both just trying to get through the appointment. Yeah. I heard you're good, Nate. Really good, from what people say. I'm glad. You too. She touched my arm, briefly, the way you'd touch an old friend rather than an old fiancé, and went back to Julian, and I watched them find their table together, his hand at her back again, and I felt something in my chest that I couldn't immediately name. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't the old ache either. It was something closer to relief, the specific, quiet relief of watching a door close all the way instead of hanging half open the way it had for 2 years. I found out later, from the same mutual friend Grapevine that had told me about her promotion, that Julian was the one who eventually signed the lease on that South Boulevard apartment, a different unit in the same building, as it happened, the summer after the wedding. Someone else got the keys she'd once said she could picture herself holding. I heard about it in passing, at a barbecue, someone mentioning it like it was nothing, and it mostly was nothing by then. A detail, a footnote to a story that had already finished telling itself. I didn't marry anyone in the 2 years after that wedding, and I'm not going to pretend this story ends with some tidy reunion that undoes everything that happened. It doesn't. Paige and I aren't in each other's lives in any regular way. We don't talk. We didn't become friends who grab coffee twice a year to catch up. What I have instead is quieter than that, and I've come to think it's better. I have a job I'm actually good at, built by actual mornings and actual work, not by anyone's permission. I have Renata, who still checks my numbers like she cares whether I sink or swim, because she does. I have Marcus, still showing up some Sundays, though now it's usually to watch football instead of to sit with me in silence. I have a version of myself that doesn't flinch anymore at lockboxes or apartment listings or green dresses at weddings. Sometimes, driving home past South Boulevard, I pass that building. I don't slow down. I don't look up at the windows to guess which one might be hers, or Julian's, or anyone's. It's just a building now, one of a dozen glass and brick apartment complexes that have gone up in that part of the city in the years since. What I remember, more than the ending, is the tour itself, the two of us standing in that empty living room with the morning light coming through, before either of us had said the thing that needed saying. I don't think about it with anger anymore. I think about it the way you think about the last normal day before everything changes, which is to say, carefully, and only every once in a while, and always a little grateful that it happened the way it did, even the part that hurt. I finished the tour that day. I think I finally understand why.